Welcome back. South African Airways and government are being sued by a little-known investment firm over what it calls a lack of transparency in the acquisition of a 51% stake in the airline by the Takatso Consortium. Documents have been filed with the High Court in Cape Town by Toto Investment Holdings. For more on this, let's speak to independent analyst Khaya Sithole, who's joining us from the UK, I believe. Khaya, welcome to the program. So, first things first, what do we know about Toto Investment and the grounds on which they're basically taking this to court?
Good evening, and good evening to the viewers. We know very little about Toto Investments except for the fact that they say they were one of those companies that put together what we refer to as an expression of interest many, many months ago, when, of course, government had made an announcement that they were looking for a strategic equity partner for the SAA stake. And at that point in time, they did, as it now turns out, appoint a bank that was supposed to advise them on who to select as their particular strategic partner. Toto then indicates that they were a company that actually then took on that particular opportunity and started engaging with the bank that had been appointed, which was Rand Merchant Bank. And their sense of grievance seems to be on the basis that having actually tried to participate in that process, they are quite unclear about how it came to be that they were excluded, firstly, and secondly, how it came to be that Takatso Consortium were the ones that actually eventually emerged as the preferred stakeholders that government chose. So the court case seeks to actually get some clarity, particularly from the Department of Public Enterprises, about what really went on behind the scenes before the Takatso Consortium were announced as the preferred partners for the state.
And the Takatso deal, of course, has been the subject of much controversy and criticism, people saying that a national asset was basically given away to the consortium. That deal, how transparent has government been about the terms and how much actually was paid?
So that is the crux of the problem here, in that it looks like government is trying to argue that this deal was not an ordinary deal that would have been going through the normal channels, whether you look at it from the lens of the Public Finance Management Act or even Section 217 of the Constitution. So one of the key problems that has emerged is the simple question of whether a department like Public Enterprises can essentially initiate and complete a process like this on its own without the concurrence or the approval of National Treasury. It is quite important to deliberate on that question, because obviously for a lot of citizens who will remember the history of modern-day SAA, a lot of public resources have been poured into that particular airlines. We're talking about billions and billions of rands. So any other transaction that then seeks to end up with SAA being controlled by somebody else, there would have been an implicit expectation that we would at least know what the terms of that deal are, would know what exactly it is that government is trying to achieve. And that's where the information deficit has been quite large, in that for a lot of people, it's still not clear who and how many companies put expressions of interest to begin with. And in fact, we're only now discovering through the court papers that have been put together by Toto Holdings what really happened behind the scenes. And the big problem is that, according to them, when RMB looked at the different companies that had said were interested in this particular business, RMB came up with the conclusion that absolutely none of them were suitable, including, of course, what then eventually became the Takatso Consortium. So if it turns out that government had appointed a bank and said, tell us who to go with, and the bank had said none of them, it is quite important for us to then figure out how it came to be that weeks later, or even months later, one of the bidders that had been unsuccessful in that initial hurdle suddenly was good enough for the Department of Public Enterprises.
On Public Enterprises, it issued a statement, the department, that was mid-May, saying that Takatso Consortium was identified as the preferred strategic equity partner. It's a consortium of private sector participants who have the requisite combination, they said, of financial and operational capabilities required for the successful operation of SAA. The statement, they said, the consortium would provide 3 billion rand in working capital to the new airline. Government makes no contribution at all to the working capital at SAA. Does that sound like a fair agreement when you consider where SAA was?
Well, the problem is that until we actually have some clarity on where SAA is at the point in time when the deal is put together, we can never know whether this was a fair deal. So the last audited financial statements, for example, that we saw relate to many, many years ago, And obviously, a lot of things have happened since then. We know there was a business rescue process, and then in the middle of the business rescue process, government actually did settle some of the historical liabilities. So until we get an insight onto what exactly SAA looked like at the point in time when Takatso said, okay, we are now taking a stake, it's always going to be a matter of speculation. But what became quite clear is that even that statement is incomplete in the sense that it simply talks about the working capital that was going to be injected by the consortium, which is the 3 billion rand. What that statement conveniently didn't mention was the fact that actually the citizens of South Africa still had to come up with another 3.5 billion rand. And this is on the back of an impression that had been created many, many moons ago that actually there'd been no more bailouts. And then it turned out that the Department of Public Enterprises said, wait, hold on, you guys always knew that there's other 3.5 billion rand that we're going to ask for. And that's what's created a lot of anxieties for a lot of people, because it does look like the department is trying to be as selective as possible in telling us what is going on with the deal and how exactly it's been structured and how much it's going to cost. And that doesn't help for a lot of people that feel that public resources may be redirected, and simply because the department doesn't want to tell us exactly what's going on.
And should Toto's legal bid proceed then or succeed, what implications would that have for the future of SAA? Is there any telling at this point? I know that you're not an expert in law, but what are the likely options?
Well, Toto has been clear in their papers in that they want the entire process that led to the Takatso Consortium being selected. They want that process to be invalidated. And of course, if that process is going to be invalidated, government has been very clear that it still wants a strategic equity partner for SAA. So if it turns out that this process is invalidated, well, they'll simply have to start the process again. And obviously, the big reason that Toto advances in its court papers is simply the lack of transparency around the deal. So if the deal had to be restarted, you'd imagine that there'd be a lot more fluidity in information exchange. There'd be a lot more clarity about who's putting up what and how much they're committing to. So that would be the only difference between the process that has been undertaken and the process that would have to materialize if Toto wins their court case.
Khaya, speaking to us about the latest around SAA and that equity partner. Thank you very much for being on the program tonight, Khaya.